What's up, guys? Welcome back to the second episode in this Athlete University. And the whole point of this is to educate and equip coaches and athletes to better understand what happens in the human body so that they are able to sift through the bullshit out there, which there is a lot of, and make better training decisions, better choices about managing their body or their injury, et cetera, et cetera. And we're just going to keep stacking on top of each lesson and getting a little bit more complex each one. So this second lesson is actually going to be about muscle contractions. So we're going to be talking about concentric, eccentric, and isometric muscle contractions. All right. So the first thing you need to understand even before we get into that is the difference between an agonist and an antagonist. So in the human body, muscles are on each side of a bone that you create a lever system with it. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I figured it's important to go over this maybe in a little bit more detail so you guys understand it. So when we have this joint, right, and these levers being the long bones, and this applies for every single muscle in the human body, there is always an agonist and an antagonist. So an agonist is the prime mover. That is the thing contracting, doing the work. And an antagonist is on the other side of the bone, and its job is actually to relax. Now, sometimes it can function to stabilize the joint, but generally speaking, if you're trying to do a bicep curl, right, you need your bicep working and your tricep completely relaxed. If your tricep was working, it would actually be working against the bicep and functioning to extend your elbow when you're trying to shorten that muscle and do a curl on the up phase. So it's really important you understand this, and I'll kind of explain it in a little bit more detail. But when we're looking at these muscle contractions, we are looking specifically at the agonist. And it's really important to remember that we are looking at the prime mover. All right, so the first muscle contraction is a concentric muscle contraction. What we talked about yesterday with the skeletal system being a lever system, we talk about the muscle contracting and doing work, and that allowing for what I call positive movement. And that is when the muscle is shortening and you are moving an object via the insertion going closer to the origin, right? So in the bicep example here, we have the insertion down here moving towards the origin. That is a concentric muscle contraction. The muscle is under tension. This is any up phase of any exercise you've ever done. All right. The next type of muscle contraction is an eccentric muscle contraction. This is when a muscle is lengthening under tension. So I don't want you to confuse this with an antagonist that was lengthening at rest, or when it's when a muscle is not contracting. This is when a muscle is contracting on the down phase of a movement, right? So the up phase is concentric, the down phase is going to be eccentric. And then lastly, we have an isometric muscle contraction. An isometric muscle contraction is when there is a no change in the length and the tension in the muscle can change. So if you are doing, say, a wall sit, or in this case, he's pulling a chain from an anchor, that is an isometric muscle contraction, okay? All right, so now we're going to get into how this applies with Usain Bolt, like we talked about yesterday. And we're just going to look at different muscles, and we're going to identify an agonist, antagonist, and then what those muscles are doing, whether concentrically, isometrically, or eccentrically. So we're just looking at toe off here, right? Or we can go like the push off phase. So he's in the blocks and he pushes off super aggressively, right? So here we have the calf contracting concentrically. So this is an agonist, concentrically contracting. Now on the other side, we have the tibialis anterior. It is lengthening, right? Now you might be thinking, well, the muscle's lengthening, it's eccentric. No, that muscle is off. It is shut off. It is doing nothing. We want maximal force in plantar flexion. So this is the only muscle contracting is your calf. The tibialis anterior is the antagonist. It is doing nothing during the push-off phase. All right. Secondly, we have at the knee, the quad is contracting, right? It is contracting concentrically. It is shortening, right? The hamstring, now this is a multi-joint muscle, but at the knee joint is relaxed. It is a hamstring or a knee flexor, it flexes the knee, and in this case, we're extending the knee. So if we're trying to propel ourselves forward, we're doing knee extension, so the hamstring is an antagonist and it is shut off. The agonist is the quad. And then here at the hip, we have a glute contracting concentrically. It is the agonist. And on the other side of that glute, we have the hip flexor. The hip flexor is an antagonist. It is off. It is doing nothing. If it is contracting, if the antagonist is functioning, it's going to make him run slower. And so better athletes are better at contracting their agonistic muscles more forcefully and better at relaxing muscles that need to be shut off very, very quickly. Okay. That said, when we see a lot of these internet coaches, specifically, I see it a lot with people that train tibialis anterior, people that train the hip flexor, people that claim that the Nordic is the key to running faster and jumping higher. Those are muscles that are antagonists during the action or agonistic prime moving part of a locomotive activity. So whether it's jumping or it's sprinting, those are antagonists. They do not help in propelling you forward. And this is why a lot of sports scientists have finally come together and been like, this is stupid, this is wrong. And a lot of people say, well, it helps me here, it helps me here, it helps me here. In regards to performance, it is not going to help. Now, if you're talking about flexing the leg, right, in that case, driving the knee forward, we see in research this is not a key performance indicator for running faster, meaning it does not determine your performance in sprinting. It is not an indicator. You could have the strongest hip flexors in the world, the most explosive hip flexors in the world, and that will not be an indicator of your performance in the 100-meter dash. Also, if the hamstring is functioning as a prime mover at the knee, flexing with the drive knee. So if you're looking at the drive knee, you can see that the knee is flexed. In this case, it is functioning as an agonist on that drive leg, right? We also see right here that the ankle is dorsiflexed. Again, it is functioning as an agonist. However, you need to remember that those muscles are not involved with, they're not in contact with the ground. The leg is not in contact with the ground. So those muscles are not contracting and shortening and producing propulsion. All right. So we have quiz time here, guys. I'm going to give you guys a couple examples, and I'm going to just go through and give you a second, maybe if you pause the video, to see whether you can identify the agonist and antagonist at whatever joint I say, and what type of contraction it is. So we are going to go with walking down the stairs, and I want you guys to think about the knee. If you're walking down the stairs, what is the agonist when you're walking down the stairs at the knee joint? Is it the hamstring or is it the quad? So take a second, think about it. I'll give you guys a few seconds to think about your answer. Walking down the stairs, what is the agonist? Is it the quad or the hamstring? The answer is the quad, okay? Now, conversely, what is the antagonist in this scenario? Is it the quad or is it the hamstring? It is the hamstring. Now, I'll ask you another question. Is the hamstring lengthening or shortening on the down phase when we're walking downstairs? And this is kind of a more complex answer. But the answer is that the hamstring is shortening as we walk down the stairs. So now the next follow-up question is it concentric or is it eccentric? And the answer is neither. It is relaxed. The muscle is relaxed. There's a trick question there. All right, last one here, guys. We're going to do picking up a heavy weight, and we're going to look at the hips. So let's look at your glute and your hip flexor. So if you are picking up a heavy weight from the ground and standing up with it like a deadlift, and you are looking at the agonist, is it the glute or is it the hip flexor? When you're picking up a weight, what is the agonist? What is the prime mover? It is the hip. The hip flexor is going to be relaxed while the hip is functioning. And what type of muscle contraction? Is it concentric, eccentric, or isometric while you're picking it up? The answer is concentric. While you're picking it up, the hip is functioning concentrically. That muscle is shortening, okay? So now let's say that I'm setting the weight back down. My hip is functioning as an agonist or antagonist. The answer is an agonist. It is functioning as an agonist on the down phase. So my hip is an agonist on the up phase of picking up a weight, and it's an agonist on the down phase of setting down a weight. That's really important to remember. The muscle that is contracting on the up phase is still contracting on the down phase. It's just functioning eccentrically versus concentrically in that example. So I hope that helped, guys. If you have questions, leave it in the comment section below. I'll try to get to those and help you guys understand this topic. It can be a little bit tricky, and as I go through more and more complex examples, it can get even more confusing. So I hope that helped, guys. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.